Hello everyone, I'm Matthew, and this is Learn the Lingo. I recently finished reading the 1999 edition of the Hebrew-English Tanakh by the Jewish Publication Society. Today, I'm going to tell you all about its different features and some of what I think about it. Let's start by going over the layout of this Bible. Since this is mainly a Hebrew Bible, which is written from right to left, this book is printed the opposite way that an English book would be. We first have some introduction pages, followed by a table of contents with all the books in order, divided into the groups of the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, the law, prophets, and writings. If you're used to the Christian order of the Old Testament, this table of contents is very helpful, since this Tanakh has the Jewish order of the books. We then have a couple prefaces, both for the Hebrew-English edition of this Bible, and also for the English translation used in it. In these, they tell us a little bit about how the translation was made and how this Bible was formatted. We then come to the Torah, with the first book of the Bible, Bereshit, Genesis. Here, we can see how the actual text is laid out, with the Hebrew text on the right side and the English translation on the left. This Bible's Hebrew text is from the Leningrad Codex, which is the oldest known complete Hebrew Bible, from 1010 AD. The English translation was created by the Jewish Publication Society, who printed this edition. In this Bible, the prose, which is anything but poetry, is divided into paragraphs. And with these paragraphs, we can see how the English roughly lines up with the Hebrew. They're not always right next to each other, but the Hebrew and its English translation do tend to be quite nicely lined up. On this first page, we can also see examples of footnotes for both the English and Hebrew text. In the Hebrew, when a word has a footnote, an apostrophe is put after it, and we'll find the corresponding footnote at the bottom of the page. This footnote is written in Hebrew, but at the back of the Bible, there is a glossary where you can see what the footnotes mean in English. The English footnotes are indicated with a letter in italics, with the first footnote of every chapter written as A. I'll talk a bit more about the footnotes later on. Moving on a little bit, here's an example of how poetry is formatted in this Bible. Both the Hebrew and the English are divided into lines of poetry instead of paragraphs. This poetry format is used especially often in the prophets. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, is traditionally divided into portions that are read every week. In this Bible, the name of each portion is written both in Hebrew and also in English at the beginning of the portion. In the upper margin, the portion you are in is also written, as well as the book you are in, the chapter, as well as the division of Torah, Nevi'im, or Ketuvim, written both in English and Hebrew. The end of every major book ends with the phrase Tam v'nishlam, Tehillah la'el borei olam. Done and completed. Praise be to God, creator of the world. Not every book ends with this phrase, since some books are put together to make one major book. 1 Kings and 2 Kings, for example, are put together into one major book, with this phrase only at the end of 2 Kings. The same for 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Chronicles, Ezra and Nehemiah, as well as the 12 minor prophets. If the last verse of a book ends on a negative note, as in Isaiah, whose last verse is, "Their worm shall not die, nor their fire be quenched, they shall be a horror to all flesh," there is a tradition of rereading the second to last verse. "Add new moon after new moon, and Sabbath after Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship me, said the Lord." In this Bible, the English of this repeated second to last verse is written in a smaller font, and in Hebrew it is written in brackets. In traditional manuscripts, a few Hebrew letters are written larger or smaller than the rest. This Hebrew edition does follow this tradition, as you can see in Deuteronomy 6, with this ayin and dalet enlarged. A few other traditional features kept in this edition are the layouts of certain parts of the text. In the Song of Moses at the Red Sea, and Deborah's song in the Book of Judges, the text is laid out like so, with the Hebrew on one page in these broken lines, and the English on the other page. And in the books of Joshua and Esther, there are a couple lists which are written in this list format. One more feature I'll point out are the inverted nuns that appear 9 times in the Bible, twice in Numbers 10 and 7 times in Psalm 107. Lastly, let's look at how this Bible shows the Kereh and Ketiv readings of the Hebrew text. These are 2 alternate readings given for many words in the Bible. If you're interested in learning more about that, please check out this video linked up here and in the description, where I talk more about how these readings work. In this Bible, the Ketiv reading, the reading that is traditionally not read, is written in a smaller font and without vowel pointings, while the Kereh reading, the reading that is traditionally read, is written the same as the rest of the text. At the end of the book, we have a guide for weekly readings of the Torah and Nevi'im throughout the year, as well as for special occasions like festivals. We also have a guide for the English and also the Hebrew footnotes. The English footnotes mainly consist of notes about the translation, like translations that could be made from ancient manuscripts other than the Hebrew used here, or places where their translation doesn't follow the rendering of most other versions. There are also footnotes where they say the literal meaning of the Hebrew versus their rendering, or pointing out something in the Hebrew that is difficult to transmit in translation. Another common footnote is meaning of Hebrew uncertain, which appears when the translators were not sure of the original text's meaning. For some examples of Hebrew footnotes, if a letter is larger or smaller than the others, a Hebrew footnote will point that out. This also happens with some other text formatting. And if a Hebrew word is spelled missing a letter, there will be a footnote saying that such letter is chaser, lacking. I won't go over all the examples of footnotes in this video, but if you have any questions about a specific footnote in this Bible, tell me where and what you'd like to know, and I'll try to help you out. So that is an overview of the JPS Tanakh. I'll now give a little of my own opinion after having read it. One thing I really like is the font, both in English and especially in Hebrew. I find this font very easy to read. All the vowel pointings and other marks are printed very distinctly, as well as beautifully. Most of the printing is done perfectly, but there are a few pages where there is a bit too much or too little ink, but it's not enough to affect the readability, and it doesn't happen very often. The only other printing issue I noticed was the upper margin in the Book of Judges, where for most of the book, its Hebrew name, Shoftim, is not spelled out all the way. Not a very significant error, but it's really the only thing I noticed went wrong. Overall, a very well-produced Bible. The English translation is not a literal one. I wouldn't say it's a paraphrase, but it is not a word-for-word translation. This is not really a bad thing for a translation in my opinion, but it can be a little tricky to match up the meaning of the Hebrew and English if you're a beginner. Also, the translation sometimes changes the order of lines of poetry in the English, usually to assist with giving a clear meaning of the text, but that again can be a little confusing when trying to read in both languages. Things like these do happen to some degree in almost all translations though, so I wouldn't say this is a particularly difficult edition to read in both English and Hebrew. It's just something to keep in mind. I can't really say how easy it would be for someone who's more of a beginner to read this Bible, since by the time I had started reading this, I had already read the Hebrew Bible in this Hebrew-English edition by Hallelujah Scriptures. If you would like me to do an in-depth review of this Hebrew-English Bible by Hallelujah Scriptures, let me know in the comments below. But I will go ahead and say, absolutely do not buy it. I really don't know how they could have messed up copy and pasting so bad. Anyway, as for how the English translation of the JPS Tanakh stands alone, it does have some interpretations that are quite different from versions like the King James, and I found it very interesting to compare both renderings with the original Hebrew. In my opinion, this translation does sometimes use unnecessarily formal or outdated language, but it's still pretty easy to read. And that's my review of the JPS Tanakh. If you enjoyed, like and share this video, comment below, and subscribe. To learn more about the Hebrew Bible, check out this playlist or this video, and if you want to learn the Hebrew alphabet, check out this playlist, and to learn Hebrew grammar, check out this one here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!